welcome to In Conversation. In the initial phase of the COVID-19 outbreak, there were analysts who made alarmist projections on the number of COVID-19 cases and number of COVID-19 deaths in India, which were picked up by the mainstream media without due diligence. Another alarmist narrative got built when certain sections of the media accused the government of deliberately hiding the actual COVID-19 death toll. Today we are in conversation with Professor Shamika Ravi. She was a member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, and she is currently a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. We will ask her if that narrative is accurate or way off the mark and driven by the urge to sensationalize to produce headline numbers. Welcome, Professor Shamika, to Doordarshan.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You've written articles highlighting that it's not that the government is trying to hide the actual COVID-19 death numbers, but there is a problem in the way the data is collected or in the system which is used to collect data. Can you tell us what makes data collection and reporting system in India vulnerable to errors?
Well, these are very difficult times. I think nobody is denying the fact that there have been deaths. I think, first of all, it's important for everyone to be on the same page as far as that is involved, because people have died, and I think the effort has to be to honor the dead, but also to learn and improve things. From that perspective, I think if you look at where we are in terms of the way we measure deaths in India traditionally, we have two basic official sources of doing that. One is, of course, the estimate of deaths in India, which is representative at the national level and at the state level, but not at the district level because it is based on large samples. This is called the Sample Registration System, the SRS. Unfortunately, the SRS has remained the same over the last 60 years, and we need to improve it. I think first and foremost, that is number one. Number two, because we estimate deaths, it means we still don't account for every death, right? I mean, it's not like we know exactly who, where died. So these are representative at national and state level, not at district, and our districts are very large. So when you think of improving healthcare access, but even beyond, I think for a modern economy, a nation, having a good civil registration of vital statistics is very, very critical, meaning we should know how many kids, babies were born, how many survived beyond so many days, 5 years, so infant mortality, etc., and eventually who died where. So this is the death part of it. These simple vital statistics are very, very critical to account for at the district and perhaps now at increasingly localized. So even beyond districts are very large in India. So that's the SRS. Second is the fact that the civil registration system, which we call the CRS, is really based on greater digitization efforts. It is also happening in places where healthcare facilities more. We have more registration of deaths in cities, in states which have better healthcare and better access to technology, etc. So the CRS, if you note over time, which is what most data scientists and a lot of researchers more recently have started using, the CRS does not, in fact, it is not equipped to measure death simply because you are seeing an increased registration with time. So if you look at 2019 data and you compare it with the last 4 years before that, then you will come up with a very erroneous conclusion that there were around 1.3 million excess deaths in 2019, even before COVID. But that is largely on the account of the fact that greater registrations are happening in India. We have reached around 92% registration, but again, huge variations across states. In fact, if you look at level of registration, then in Manipur, we have 21%. That is comparing CRS to the SRS. So how many deaths are registered compared to how many deaths are estimated? It's 21% in Manipur. But in a place like Chandigarh, it is 463%. What does that mean? It tells you that the registration is of people who are coming from all around Chandigarh to Chandigarh for healthcare. There are deaths that are happening in Chandigarh, which are not domiciliary deaths. These are people from around the neighborhood. And it is the same case if you look at Delhi. Delhi has always had more than 250% registrations in the last decade or so. You will see the same thing in Karnataka. You will see this in almost all developed parts of the country. And definitely the big metros, that is likely to be. So if you extrapolate from the CRS to how many excess deaths have happened in India, you're likely to, most likely, going to come up with extremely sensational numbers. Now, remember, CRS traditionally, and we have been writing about it now for over a decade, that we need better health systems. The registration also, Munmun, is not uniform. And I don't mean just urban, rural, or developed versus underdeveloped parts of the country. It is systematically low for weaker segments of the society. Registration of deaths of infants, women, rural areas is very low. So you see, it is not just an overall estimate which you are likely to come up with, misleading and sensational numbers, but also, the picture isn't accurate the minute you get into demographics. In fact, we have just found out in one of our analysis that more than 100 districts in India have reported less than 10 infant deaths in a year. This is 2019. Now, you know the size of our districts. It's really a registration and a data problem more than an actual what the reality of the situation is. Then I think the third source, which is now getting used increasingly by researchers, is the one from CMI. They put up the Consumer Pyramid Household Survey. And the problem with that one is that, it is a survey really done to capture or to measure consumption and labor force participation in the country. It is not meant to capture rare events like death. So the entire sampling process of the CPHS is very different from what the SRS is, for instance. So I've just given you a snapshot of the three basic data sets, what the problems are. But the underlying issue is that we have a very archaic data architecture. And it is time, it is high time. And this particular pandemic has definitely put that problem at the center, in front of each of us who are interested in policy. And I think it's the biggest task for the government now, not just because we need to capture what truly is the extent of suffering that we have faced and we are facing. Remember, the pandemic is not over. But unlike rich countries, you see, OECD countries have very robust CRVS systems. So in these countries in Western Europe, Japan, US, Canada, etc., you can measure deaths over years and account for excess death and attribute that to COVID. And perhaps that would be the right way to do it, because we haven't really defined what is a COVID death yet. In fact, and this is a problem even in developed countries, that what is the cause of death is going to, COVID deaths are still getting defined in different countries. So to be all inclusive and to get a sense of what the loss has been in terms of lives, researchers are doing excess death estimates. And it makes sense for those countries where the CRVS system is good. But in a country like India, where the CRVS system is not, it's not suitable for this kind of analysis, you are likely to come up with extremely sensational, misleading, sometimes scary, but also remember, it could be completely downplaying the problem as well. We don't know what the extent of the problem is.
Absolutely. So the picture as far as the death toll of COVID-19 in India is concerned is not clear. You've pointed to the various inadequacies that are there in the three different data collection systems in use in the country. You've also told us about how OECD countries record their numbers. You have suggested that there should be a large-scale demographic survey that should be conducted to ascertain the COVID death numbers. How would that be different from the current systems that we have?
Well, we have seen this from past experiences. And there is a good study, quite an accurate one, that came out after a hurricane in Puerto Rico, where the household survey basically said, the number of deaths was 70 times more than the actual death. I'm just giving you a theoretical scenario of what is possible. Now, household surveys are really the best way currently, given that we don't have a robust CRVS system. The best way to understand what is the extent of suffering at a localized level, beyond national statistics and even states. Our states are the size of countries. We need to now have a large-scale household survey done so that we have estimates at the district level as well. Now, I know this is, it's a time of pandemic. Very large part of the government machinery, for instance, MOSPI, has Ministry of Statistics and Planning, etc. We have not seen new surveys conducted over last several months. But I think that is going to be moving forward the tallest task. I mean, I really think we should, put our efforts towards what is possible. But I think that is where we have to realize that this debate, this discussion is getting passionate. I think everyone is interested, and therefore you are seeing the kind of numbers which are being thrown, all around. But beyond passion, I think it's very misleading to come up with these kind of estimates in the middle of a pandemic as well. So I don't think that in a democracy, a liberal democracy like India, where media is free. Remember, we get to know of oxygen shortages, babies' deaths in hospitals in remote parts of the country. We get to know them over time. So it is not possible to hide things in India. And frankly, that is the reason I believe that the explanation for what is happening is much simpler than what is being ascribed to, that there is a grand conspiracy to hide numbers. I think the explanation is far simpler, Munmun. I think the explanation is that we just don't know. The system doesn't know. The data architecture does not lend itself to a real-time measurement of deaths. And therefore, the large survey becomes absolutely important.
Yes, in fact, people largely relied on the mainstream media to know the COVID-19 cases as well as deaths, and thus the responsibility of the media becomes many times in such a situation to be able to report correctly. Having said that, is there a revision of the numbers likely anytime in near future by the government? Also, if there is a revision, would you expect the media to be conscious of the fact that they need to update the numbers and inform the people?
Sometimes when I do see the media, I also wonder whether a large part of the media is discovering rural India for the first time. Because a lot of, those of us who have been studying, and you can ask most development economists who deal with rural areas and rural infrastructure, healthcare in particular, it is highly inadequate. We have known, and this is where, we like to highlight the fact that when we have districts after districts which report 0 babies' deaths in the whole year, and this has been the case now for decades, that is the reality of where we are as far as capturing the data is concerned. So when media highlights something, I think it is important because that is what democracy is. Free press in a democracy is extremely important. But what you make out of it, to sensationalize it as if to believe that the government is actively hiding, I think is a bit of a stretch. That is why I think revisions will happen. Now, even within the pandemic, if you just look at the daily death numbers, there have been revisions. There are constant revisions happening from state to state. We have had it in Tamil Nadu, we've had it in Bihar, we've had it in Jharkhand, Maharashtra, Delhi. Yes. So state after state, they are revising. These kind of data corrections are going to happen. So I think, trying to jump the gun, come up with these kind of estimates through whatever means, and do that in the midst of a pandemic, this rush to paint India as a basket case, I think doesn't do justice to the real cause. And the real cause is one of access to healthcare, which is very poor, and it is highly unevenly distributed across the country, and the archaic data architecture. So the more we point out what the specific detailed aspects of what is wrong with the data, I think therein stands a better chance of corrections and improvement in governance.
Amid the pandemic, it was expected of the media to inform the people at large and also create awareness on COVID-appropriate behavior. What's your assessment on whether the media at large was able to live up to this responsibility?
An important aspect of media, Munmun, in democracies, we can't talk about authoritarian countries like China because we don't know what is the nature of media coverage, etc. But we know this from early literature in development economics. We have extremely insightful work from Professor Amartya Sen, Jodres, etc., which have shown that, in democracies with free press, famines have never happened because local level reportage, local level news collection makes it impossible to have large-scale famines because governments have to respond to people in democracy. Now, in the particular context of the COVID pandemic, we have studied, in fact, we have just published a paper looking at 20 media houses in India, and looking at how much coverage did they provide to COVID. Now, it is extremely interesting because we see that there is considerable complacency after the first few months. The first few months, it was heightened coverage, and that was appropriate for that time. But this is where the role of the media in a pandemic becomes important. That, there are lots of non-pharmaceutical interventions like masking, social distancing, staying at home, if you don't need to travel, washing hands, opening windows. Now we know the role of ventilation in the spread of this infection. All of these things can be promoted. Good COVID protocol adherence can be communicated repeatedly and wisely through the media. And I think this is where it goes beyond the role of a government. I think the government will do what it's supposed to do, and it should do, but there is a role for the media as well. That, people have to be made aware of the dangerous nature of the situation, but at the same time, without getting alarmist.
Is the need to reform the data architecture that you are pointing to a long-standing one and not something which is a post-COVID phenomena?
Oh, it is definitely a long-standing one. Remember, even in our developed states, including Kerala and Tamil Nadu, which are, often we're very proud of these states for the kind of public health infrastructure that they have put in place. Kerala more historically, Tamil Nadu more in the last decade and a half. But even in these developed healthcare spaces, our data registration, death registrations, particularly for weaker sections, infants, neonatal mortality, are extremely low. So that just tells you that we have still a long way to go historically. But I do think COVID has put, extreme, intense light on this problem. And to that effect, I think it's an opportunity. A window of opportunity has emerged where we do recognize that this gap is a significant one. And by not correcting this, by flying blind, by not having an accurate sense of what is the suffering, not just to honor the dead. As a society, it's very important to honor the dead, but more importantly, going forward, where is the health access worse? Where does it need to be improved? Comorbidities, really, what kind of ailments led to more deaths? Which are the places? What is the age profile? What is the gender profile? We know that there are serious gender inequities when it comes to access to healthcare in several parts of our country. So I think this is a long-standing problem. It's a very fundamental problem, but it is also a problem that a modern economy has to deal with on an urgent basis. If indeed we are to, we aspire to be a leading global economy and a nation.
It is pertinent, like you are saying, to reform India's data architecture. But what is the kind of investment, training, and infrastructure that is required to make the entire system, which is archaic currently, more robust and less error-prone?
I think, Munmun, eventually, remember, data, and that too vital data, statistics of this type, birth, death, infant mortality, etc. It is the responsibility of the government. And I think largely it is on account of the archaic system that you are seeing. People depend on CPHS, which is the CMI data, sometimes telephone surveys. For instance, the NCAER has done some very good surveys on the initial impact of the lockdown, etc. People depend on systems and data outside the government largely because I think keeping up with this dynamic nature of the economy, I'm talking beyond COVID now, we really, as the government, needs to make the investment, not just in terms of, capital. Money is really not the largest cost here. The constraint is truly in terms of qualified, trained manpower. We do need now real-time data, capturing, but more importantly, data is just noise if you don't know how to transform it into information. So we also need the data scientists. We need the statisticians in the government Some of these things, these are public goods. This cannot be outsourced to any private agency or frankly, global multilaterals or funders, large international donors. No, this is a fundamental strategic public good for the nation. And that is why the responsibility sits with all tiers of the government.
Yes. For the benefit of the viewers, can you also explain that if and when those necessary reforms are brought about, what is the kind of sea change that we expect to see in the way public policy is made and access to healthcare takes place and resource allocation also?
There is likely to be a sea change because you see, policy making is moving into real time, precise. In fact, we call it precision policy making now, because beyond national level statistics, beyond even state level statistics, Munmun, you need district level and sometimes block level estimates of the problem to really manage it, because these are very large in terms of the number of people in the district. So even if you look at a state like Uttar Pradesh, with about 75, 76 districts, enormous variations. So even, if you talk about a policy for UP, it is unlikely to be uniform across all these districts. This is exactly the same in every state, right? So whether we are talking about healthcare, what is the capacity of the district hospital? What is the capacity within the district hospital for communicable versus non-communicable diseases? How should they be changed with time? Because different states are dealing with different kinds of healthcare problems. In fact, the leading cause of death in a place like Uttarakhand is respiratory ailments, right? That needs very different kind of health infrastructure than, let's say, Kerala, where the leading cause of death is cardiovascular ailments. UP has a very large number. In fact, the second largest killer of women in UP is diarrheal deaths. Diarrheal deaths means, again, it's mostly access to clean water, sanitation, etc., which can take care of the problem. And cardiovascular will require different kind of health intervention and health architecture. So you see, the more precise the data, the more localized and real-time the data, the better the policy, and by extension, better the health outcomes, better the quality of life of an average citizen in particular districts.
Professor Shamika, there's also a lot of interest around modeling studies that we are seeing the world over, including in India, on possible COVID-19 cases and deaths going forward. Are these reliable sets of information? How accurate do they prove to be eventually?
Now, of course, we have the benefit of hindsight. We have seen epidemiologists, and these are the real specialists. People like us, economists, we dabble in this, not to make forecasts. In fact, I have never made forecasts simply because I realize the extremely complex nature of this problem, but also the high degree of uncertainty that the virus itself lends to this exercise. In fact, that is the reason that nobody predicted the enormity of the second wave in India, because nobody predicted a Delta variant to emerge. And that is the problem, with this situation, that you can't predict variants. Variants are an outcome of, thousands of different variables that go into, this kind of evolution that is happening. So I think predictions have been wrong, and I think people must be modest. Models, however sophisticated, have fallen short time and again. And I think that is where policymakers, media, have to take this with a grain of salt, sometimes with a sack full of salt, because the difference between what is predicted and eventually what emerges are very large. To attribute it to a few variables, to say that this is just because of bad management, or this is because Indians are young, or this is because of environmental factors, I think a lot of these will go into eventually explaining the nature of this pandemic. But one thing that we do know is that vaccines do work, and currently I think that is the big policy priority across countries and for our country as well.
Absolutely. So we need to reform the data architecture. We shouldn't jump the gun as stakeholders, and also the media needs to see that there is more to the story than just headline numbers. Thank you, Professor Shamika Ravi, for joining us on Doordarshan.